This conference will now be recorded.
All right. So, firstly, before we get started, anyone, any questions, guys, that I can take before we can get started with this session? Anyone, any questions? Okay. So, in yesterday's class, if you kind of look at a scripts, let's go there and let's open up our script for container creation, and let's open this out. Right. So, if you look at this particular script out here, I have been passing a lot of input parameters. So I said, okay, fine. As a customer, I as an end client, I want to go ahead and let's say give some input, like my resource group name, like the storage account name, the location, the container name, and so on and so forth. And the parameterization is helping my end client to pass the inputs. I don't deny that. Meaning, if you call this particular script, if you go here and call this particular script, you will now be in a position to go ahead and let's say pass all these overrides by giving something like, for example, you can say dot backslash container creation hyphen. You can give, let's say, the name of the resource group. Then you can give a space, then say hyphen the name of the storage account, then hyphen the name of the location and all that stuff. Good enough, but see, this also causes some amount of difficulty. When I say some amount of difficulty, what exactly is the difficulty that I'm talking about? Let's give it a second. What is the difficulty that I'm really talking about out here is this. See, if the script will work super fine if the amount of inputs are less. Why do I really say this? No, why do I really say that the amount of inputs are less? Because, see, as an end user, it'll become very difficult for me to, let's say, do this every time. I'll say container.ps1 and then I'll basically start passing all the parameters out here by, giving a space and etc. The amount of parameters that I can actually remember, or the amount of, let's say, inputs that I can actually remember is very limited. If the amount of inputs are going super huge, it'll become very difficult for me to, let's say, pass the same thing. Second thing is reproducibility, meaning, am I really saving this input somewhere? No, not really. I'm just going ahead and passing this input, and the script is creating. And in case, let's say, you create a resource group called devrg, and you create a storage called dev storage, and you upload a container called dev container, and you upload some blobs out here. You do all these things. Some one day you realize that this particular let's say resource group, storage account, and etc. has to be deleted for some kind of a testing. Your team wants to test something, they want to delete and see what happens. They delete it out and they ask you to recreate it. You never know what is the value here. They ask you to recreate it after a month probably, so you don't even remember what is the values that you passed, and now they want the exact value to be created, exact, let's say, objects and exact names and exact things to be created right now. That's where reproducibility comes into picture, which means that it would be really helpful for me if I can save all these things into a file and pass the entire file as an input to this particular PowerShell script. Which means now, as a client, I have now a lot of inputs right now, and I want to store my inputs. I want to do something called as configuration management. This is what I'm getting into. So I want you to write a script in such a way that I, as a client, I would give you a file, and your PowerShell script should take this file as an input. It should just go into this file, take this as an input out here. Or probably I can, probably PowerShell script can just ask me what is a file path. That's it. I just need to give the file path. Your script should read that particular file path, understand what are the names of, let's say, the resource group or the storage account or the container or the file path. Just take all those things and then start uploading, or then take all those things and then start, let's say, working on such a kind of things out there, or it has to, let's say, go and create those things and etc. Advantages here is I as a client, I can just go ahead and update this particular file on a regular basis and run this particular script. I don't have to pass any input to this particular script right now. And in case my team, in the second case, asks me to go ahead and delete a particular resource group, I can delete it out. If they ask me to recreate it at a later point in time, I can just come here and just change some properties here, or just, let's say, update this particular file and again retrigger my script, or even without updating my file, I can retrigger my script. This will go and read that particular configuration, and since you've already stored all that configuration, now you have an accuracy, or now you have a belief that the script is going to, let's say, produce, or the script is going to create the same resources again, like a dev rg, or a dev storage, or a dev container, or the blobs basically that you upload. So this is what we would like to maintain going forward. Is that okay? Fine, I want a, let's say, file. One of the scenarios, I want a file, I want my PowerShell script to read the file, and that's what we will be looking into today. So that's the agenda. Now, when I say file, again, my client is going to ask, okay, fine, what kind of a file would you need? Is it a text file? Is it an Excel sheet? Or is it something else? For which, as of today, a lot of people would be using a file, something called as a JSON file, one of the most widely used file types. The .txt, the .xls, all these are considered a little primitive. Yes, they will allow you to store information, but the capability that it gives you is very, very limited. Whereas you have a file type called .json files. JSON here stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's written in a language called JSON, which gives you much more power, much more, let's say, capability in order to store your objects, in order to maintain your objects, or in order to maintain anything out here as such. And this is what we'll be looking into today, on how do you firstly write a JSON file, what do you really need to write a JSON file, and then how do you maintain this particular JSON file, and then how do you use a PowerShell script in order to go ahead and read this particular JSON file. This is something that we'll be looking into today, on how do you deal with something called as a JSON, and what was really file handling, and so on and so forth out here as such. So this is what we'll be going into. So before I get in this particular concept, any questions that I can take with the theory of it? Anyone, any questions that I can really take before I get started here?
Can I ping the question in the chat?
Yes, I'm just checking that. I created a storage account with PowerShell. It is created, but it's not showing all the details when you, okay, when it's created, but it's not showing all the details when you did it created. Okay, so you're doing a get hyphen AZ storage account is something that you're telling, or when you created it, it's not giving you all the details?
Yeah, we are using.
I'm sorry, I lost your voice.
Sorry, some network issue, Kiran. I'll ping in the chat.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, in the meanwhile, anyone, any other questions, guys, that I can take? Anyone, any questions that I can take before we get started with, let's say, the JSON, and we'll understand what is really JSON with a simple example, and then we'll see how do you write JSON and all these things out here. Okay, so Ramakrishna, just ping me the question in the chat. I'll, once I finish this session, I'll, kind of go ahead and look at that, or in between, I can go ahead and look at that out there as such. So let me come back. So this is the file that I want to write, and the file now today is called as a .json file, wherein it will allow me, or it will give me a capability to firstly store the objects, store multiple objects, meaning an array, and store things like, let's say, numbers, booleans. All this kind of information is actually supported using this particular file type out here as such. Now, in order to write this particular file, you will need an editor. Just like you have a software called Excel in order to write Excel sheets, or you have a software called Notepad in order to write text documents, you will need some kind of an editor in order to write your JSON files. Again, there are multiple things that are available in the market, like something called a Notepad++, or if you want to, do something advanced, you can go into something called Visual Studio Code. We call it as VS Code, which is one of the most universal versatile softwares that we'll be using throughout our course in order to, achieve, or in order to do many more things out here as such. So let's go here and understand how do you download and install VS Code and how do you really use it. And I already have VS Code installed on my laptop. So I already have the software installed on my laptop out here. So in order to make sure that I do the installation, the virtual machine that we created, right? I'm just going into the particular virtual machine, and I'll just do a demo installation here so that you all can all follow and do the same installation at your end. And I would like you all to install this particular software out here as such. So just go here, say download VS Code. I mean, you can use your Internet Explorer, Firefox, whatever browser that you of your choice, and just go here and click on the very first link called code.visualstudio.com/download. And here it's going to tell you, okay, fine, you want download the VS Code for Windows, or let's say Ubuntu or Macintosh. I'll just go ahead and let's say, okay, fine, download VS Code out here. And as soon as I do that, let me go ahead and say hit the download button. This is user installer, the 64-bit, and I think it's blocking the pop-up here. Give me a second. Let's see if I am able to download this out. Okay, how about something? Okay. Now sometimes your Internet Explorer will act a little weird. So let me go ahead and download this out. Okay, fine. Okay, let me try this out once again. Download VS Code. And yes, let's see if I'm able to, let's say, download it from another link here. It'll again divert me to the same thing, which is going to ask me to download this one for Windows. But for some reason, the browser is not really supporting. So fine, that's not a problem. Let me come back to my own system. Let's say download VS Code up here. So all I want you to do is this. You hit this particular link out here, and when you hit this particular button, this is going to go ahead and give you a download option. So if you click this, this is the page basically that it's going to, let's say, go ahead and divert you to, and it's going to download a simple exe file. It's going to go ahead and download a simple exe file out here. All I want you to do is just go ahead and do a double click on this particular exe file, and it will take about 1 or 2 minutes for this software to be installed. And once that's done, go ahead and restart your system. And once you restart the system, just go ahead and say Visual Studio Code. You should be able to see something called Visual Studio Code that is installed. You should see the application called Visual Studio Code that is installed on your machine. Just click on the open. And as soon as you open, these are a couple of things that I've written. So it's caching the older session out here. But as and when you open, you will not find all these files and all that stuff. You will see a simple page here, firstly, to ask you to select the color. So it's telling, okay, fine, it Visual Studio offers you in the lighter version, in the darker version, all that stuff. So let's see if I have that. Okay, where is that? Just my files and all that stuff. Fine. So it's firstly going to ask you, or it's firstly going to tell you, what is the color that you want to, let's say, really configure this, let's say, Visual Studio Code in. So it's going to tell you whether you want it in a light color or you want it in, let's say, all these colors are basically present out here in the very first screen out there, telling what is the color, what do you want to, how do you want to, let's say, configure your Visual Studio Code. And depending upon your preference, you can go and give any color out here as such. That's completely up to you. And once that's done, please come here and click on File and say open a folder. For example, let's say I want to open a folder. I want to create a new folder today, and I want to tell that this name is called file handling, and just select this particular folder. Now, in my case, the folder is directly getting opened. In your case, when you open the folder for the very first time, you'll have a pop-up here telling, do you want Visual Studio to allow this folder to be opened or not? Just say trust. You will have something called trust and untrust. Just say trust out there, and you will, let's say, fall into this particular page telling get started with Visual Studio, what do you want to do, and etc. And the left hand corner, it's just going to tell you what is there inside the folder. As of now, I just created the empty folder. I created a dummy folder out here inside this particular chunk, and there are nothing. There are no files out here as such. Now, what I want to do is that I want to go ahead and, let's say, put a file here telling the student details. Student details. I would say the extension of the file type is called .js or in JSON. I'm not installing any software for JSON. I'm not doing anything for JSON. I'm just putting an extension called .json. I'll say enter. What this is going to give me is now this is going to give me a capability to write my JSON files in an editor called Visual Studio out here. And today I'm just telling that let's say, I'm a school organization and I have multiple students who are passing out. Like I am storing the details of multiple students, like what is the class of the student, is the student attending regularly or not, what is the name of the student, what is the, let's say, subjects that the student has taken. Couple of details for this, but for one particular student out here is what I want to store using my JSON file. Now in JSON, when you begin your journey, each and every information in JSON needs to be represented within flower brackets. Each and every object or each and every property of JSON needs to start and end with flower brackets out here. This is the very beginning of JSON, meaning this is how you start JSON out here. Inside this, meaning within the open and flower brackets, you can start writing your properties in the form of key value pair. Meaning you can say student name is the key. You can say the value of the student name is something like Kiran. You can say which course enrolled and all that stuff. So you can have multiple key value pairs out here. So for example, if I would like to write a property out here of JSON, I'll start with flower brackets. So as and when I put one flower bracket, right, the Visual Studio will understand, okay, fine, you want to write JSON, it'll also close the flower bracket. I just said enter, and it just gave me a space out here, and it took me to the, let's say, next line. And it's now telling, okay, fine, write what you want to write. So in JSON, the sample here is this: in quotes, key, colon, value. This is the example of a key value pair in JSON. This is called as a key value pair, which has to be represented. The key has to be represented within quotes. The colon has to be there as a separator between key and the value. And the value has to be represented in quotes out here as such. So it's a key value pair that I'm representing in this particular format. Now, for example, I can have a key value pair called name of the student. So I'll say name, and in the value I'll say Kiran. And if I want to say which year of a student this is, meaning which year pass out or something like that, I'll say comma in order to enter the next key value pair, and I can say year of passing, and I can again give a value here telling something like 2010 is the year of passing, or 2020, whatever it is. And I can now give, let's say, a key value pair again, and I'll say let's say things like section he belongs to. I'll say a B section or something like that. So multiple key value pairs separated by comma. So first key value pair, this is the name. Second, this is the name. Third, this is the name. For example, let's say I want to also give a roll number. I can give a number also here telling something like 89. So when I want to declare a number, meaning an integer, I won't pass it in quotes. When I want to declare a string, I'll pass it in quotes. A difference between a string and an integer. And then I'll write things like contact email and contact number, something like this. Say email, I'll say kiran@gmail.com. I can also be writing a contact number and so on and so forth. So the idea here is separation of key and value by using a colon and commas. So first key value, I can say key 1 colon value 1 encapsulated in quotes, comma, then key 2 value 2 encapsulated in quotes. This is how we go ahead and represent a JSON object. This entire thing now becomes a JSON object out here because it's starting with and closing with a flower bracket, and each and every object inside the JSON is a key value pair, and these are the properties of the JSON. Each and every, let's say, key value pair is now representing the properties of the JSON, and I can save my file. In order to save this, just say Control S. I want to save the file, and now the file is saved out here as such. Yes, any questions with how do I write a JSON? I'm not getting into how do I read the JSON and etc. But any questions with how do I really write the JSON file out here as such?
Kiran, I joined a little late. This is the first thing we started writing a JSON
Yes,
file.
yeah, this is the first thing that we started. So we were
Okay,
just
okay.
seeing how to install the
Visual
VS
Studio.
Code on our
Okay,
systems,
right, right.
yes,
Got it, got it.
and then how to write a JSON file out here as such.
So we can also write in YAML, or it doesn't support YAML?
The editor,
No, editor supports. I mean, we are writing
yes,
JSON for the file handling, right? So
yes.
similarly, can we also write in YAML?
See, YAML as of now, the PowerShell doesn't have the module to support YAML. But there are a couple of people who have also written the modules that can go ahead and read a YAML out here. But as far as what my knowledge goes, PowerShell is not supporting YAML as of now, but I can just check if there is any module update for the same.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yes, any questions, guys? Anyone, any more questions here? Okay, so what I now want to do is that, see, I want to use a PowerShell script. Like I was telling, I want to use a PowerShell script to go ahead and take this JSON file as an input. And then start reading all the properties of that particular JSON file. When I say properties of that particular JSON file, now this is a JSON object that I've written. This entire thing is a JSON object that I've written. And every key value pair is now the property of this particular JSON object, like name, like year of passing, like section, like roll number, like the email, and all that stuff. So what I want to do is that I just want to come down, either use a PowerShell ISE, either go with a PowerShell ISE, or the VS Code also gives me a capability to go ahead and write my PowerShell scripts here. So for that, you need to click on this particular button called extensions. It's like the marketplace for VS Code where you can go ahead and install multiple extensions out there. I can put an extension telling PowerShell, and all you need to do is just go ahead and install the first extension called PowerShell by Microsoft. In my case, it is installed. In your case, when you click this, right, instead, in place of disable or uninstall, you will have a simple thing here called install. Just click on the install button. Should take around a minute or two, and the extension of PowerShell will be installed out here as such. Now this PowerShell extension will just go ahead, use PowerShell ISE in the background, use all the modules that are installed in the background, and it will just help you execute your scripts out here. So you can either do PowerShell ISE, or you can do Windows PowerShell, or you can go ahead and write your scripts in, let's say, VS Code. I'll also tell you what is the advantage that you get when you write a script in, let's say, VS Code out here, and how do you execute the same thing out here as such. So what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and start writing a script in VS Code, a PowerShell script in VS Code. So I'll just add a new file. I'll say new file, and I'll say file handle dot ps1, since that's the extension. And as in when I put a ps1, right, it's understanding that okay, fine, you want to write a PowerShell, and it will load the terminal for the PowerShell. So okay, fine, you know what? I load the terminal in the PowerShell. I'll see that now. I load the terminal in the PowerShell. It's saying okay, fine, you are calling something called as a PowerShell extension, and it's loading that PowerShell extension out here. So just like you had in, let's say, uh, in a PowerShell IC, you had a screen where you can write, which is the white screen, which was the white screen, and you had a terminal that could give you the output. The same thing is happening in VS Code also. VS Code is telling, okay, fine, you know what, you can write and you can, let's say, do the, you can, show the output. And in the right hand corner, this is the run select, or this is the run script, meaning to run everything. And this is run selection, meaning just run selected. The two buttons that you used to see in PowerShell IC. So in PowerShell IC also you had the same two buttons out here called run selection and run script out here as such. And you can adjust the length of this particular, let's say, output window by just dragging this out. You can just completely vanish this out, or you can just let's say tell what is the, let's say, amount of space that you want to write out here as such. So same thing here, if you see, you have a run selection, or you have a run script and a run selection, two buttons. These are the two things that basically PowerShell will give you out here as such as well. This is where you can start writing your script. And today what I want to do is I want to write a script that goes ahead and gets the details of this particular JSON file out here. So for which I will start with something called get, and I want to get some content. So it's get hyphen content. So I'm saying get content space. I'll just give, say, hyphen path. So I'm saying hyphen path, and I would like to give the file path of my JSON out here. So this is the JSON. This is, let's say, where I've written, which is E something like this, junk and something like that. I can just copy the entire path. In quotes, I can just go ahead and pass the path. I can say forward slash. I can say student details or student details or JSON out here. This is something that I can do. But since I'm in the same folder, out here, I can replace this entire thing with a dot because I'm in the same folder. So it makes it a little easier for me to just go ahead and put a dot here. So if I even put a dot here, I'll say dot backslash. It'll also load things. So it's telling, okay, fine, you want me to go inside the folder and give you a file. It'll also give me the same thing out here as such. So you can either pass the entire path of the file that you have written, or you can just put the dot backslash and give a, let's say, let's say file name out here. Works. And now if I just execute this out, so I'll just copy, I'll just, let's say, select this entire line, or just place my cursor here. I'll just click on run selection. What it does here is that now it says, okay, fine, get content. So it says, okay, fine, you want me to get the content. I got the content for you. I got the content for you, telling that, okay, fine, this entire JSON. So whatever file is there, either it be, let's say, something like an XML file, or it be an XLS file, or it be a CSV file, whatever it is, the script would go ahead, unpack the contents there, and it will display all the contents on your screen. Which is okay, fine. I would like to display the contents on the screen and so on and so forth. Now, what I want to do is that I probably want to write statements like write host. I want to say name of the student. Now I can say name of the student is Kiran here. And I can go ahead and let's say write things like write host. Pass out year is 2010. By 2010 by looking at the content here. But that is not the intention. I don't want to look at the content and then write something here, because if this is just like about 4 or 5 properties, I can just go ahead and simply write it in a minute. But what if there are 400 or 500 properties out there? The idea here was to treat this entire JSON like an input to my script. To treat this entire JSON like an input to my script out here. I just didn't want to go ahead and let's say read this file and then write or then hard code my, let's say, entire code. This is something that I don't want to do it. I just want to take this input, meaning if you want to now take this file as an input to PowerShell, as of now, this entire data is in a raw JSON format. This is all in a raw JSON format out here. I have to convert this entire JSON into the language what PowerShell understands, and that language itself is PowerShell. I'll have to now convert JSON into PowerShell. So what I can do, I can put a pipeline here. So I'm telling, okay, whatever output that you're getting here, please pass on to the next command, and I'll say convert from, and you have multiple things here telling convert from CSV, convert from JSON, convert from Markdown. I'll say convert from JSON, meaning please go into that particular file, read the content, and please convert it from a JSON. If I now go ahead and execute this out, what I'm going to get here is this kind of information. In the form of a name value pair, it's unpacked everything, and it's now telling, okay, fine, I understand this is a key, this is a value, this is a key, this is the value. I now understand this particular, let's say, selection. Saying, okay, fine, the key value pair is now unpacked, and I can now go ahead and start reading the property. Now, one thing that you have to, let's say, take care of, guys, is the syntax of JSON. Now, very importantly, if you do not give the JSON a proper syntax, meaning if you miss a comma somewhere, let's say I miss a comma here, or I miss a quotation here, it will automatically start throwing errors telling that you don't want expected comma or expected a closure. And if you try to, let's say, read this file and convert it from JSON, it's simply going to throw an error telling that, okay, fine, conversion failed, because I don't understand the language that you are giving me out there, because it's not really a pure JSON out there. The language is deserialized, or the language is not properly presented. So if you're getting this particular error, it definitely means that you are missing something on your JSON. One way to do this is like, just go and read this particular error. It's telling expected comma or a closing brace. Here it's telling, okay, fine, there is, another comma that you are missing and all that stuff. Now, one thing that you can do is either read this, or you can just copy your entire data and just go Google and just say JSON validator. You have a website called jasonlint.com. Just place your code entirely here. Just say validate JSON. This will itself tell you what you're missing on. What exactly that you're missing on out here. Are you missing something, or what exactly that you're missing here? It's telling there's a rule number. It was expecting something like a closing bracket or something like this, but it got a string and so on and so forth. This will help you understand how to fix the JSON. You can come here, of course, put a comma here and then go inside. Of course, put a comma here and then go ahead, and after that, close this bracket out here as such, which is, let's say, a good type of JSON. And if you just copy this out, go back and kind of paste this out, and then hit the validate button once again. This is something that you have to see that your JSON is valid. So in the initial phases, I would say, if you are not used to JSON, if you do not understand how to write JSON and all that stuff, I would very strongly suggest to use this JSON validator to see how you can validate your file, to see how you can, let's say, basically, you can validate your file and say if there are any errors and how you can correct those errors out here as such. And once you write that, I'm just going ahead and I'm writing a code here telling get content, and I'm giving the path of the JSON file, a pipeline, and then I'm saying convert from JSON. I'm saying please go ahead and convert this entire thing, the entire input from JSON. And it's saying, okay, fine, yes, I'll convert it out. And this is the result of my conversion. We call this one as a PS object. It's a PowerShell object. And this object has a lot of properties out here, which I'll go into the object and see how you can do the right host statements out here as such. Yes, any questions still here that I can take on how did I write it and how did I convert this out here and so on and so forth.
So one thing, Kiran,
Mhm.
I mean, we can write this in hash tables also, right?
You can write this in hash tables also. Yes, you can do a hash table also. But again, since I'm giving an input, the entire idea was to avoid these parameterization. You can ask the user to pass a hash table and you can read a hash table. Yes, you can do that. But the entire idea that I started the file handling with is that if you have multiple let's say input parameters, it's going to become a little difficult to, let's say, go ahead and pass all those hash tables and to maintain your configuration as such. That's where I'm telling, okay, fine, let's give the user a capability to go ahead and pass it entirely into a file, and let's start reading this file, and this file can be updated on a periodic time, and then you can run your scripts out here as such.
So hash tables, I mean, where are the good use cases for hash tables? This is file reading, file
Mhm.
handling. I mean, we can use JSON, but hash
Okay.
tables, where you can use.
For example, if you want to put some tags onto your resource groups, let's say you have a resource group. One simple use case scenario is you have a resource group. You want to put a tag on top of that particular resource group, and for a tag, now if you'll just go ahead and say new hyphen a resource group and look at the command here, a tag here expects a data type called hash table. So there are a couple of commands in PowerShell wherein it will expect explicitly for you to pass something like a hash table out here. Those would be a good use case scenario. Again, I'll get into hash table. I do not cover that particular data type yet. So I'll get into hash table, and I'll also, let's say, explain what a hash table really is. And again, this is not a hash table. It's a PS object basically that I'm dealing with. Hash table looks similar, has similar things that you can do, but this is now considered to be a PS object, a PowerShell object out here as such. Yes, any more questions, guys? Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just use a variable here called data is equal to something. So what I'm doing right now is I'm saying whatever output that I'm getting from this entire line, please store it inside this particular variable called data. And if I now go ahead and say execute this out, what it does very simple is that in dollar data it stores all my object. And if I now go ahead see what is dollar data, I'll say data dot get type PowerShell custom object. We call this as a PS object. A PowerShell custom object is what is the data type out here with couple of properties like name, year of passing, section, roll number, email, and etc. So if I go ahead and say dollar data and I put a dot here, I can filter the properties right now. So I can say dollar data dot name. I can say dollar data dot year of passing. I can say dollar data dot the section. I can say dollar data dot the roll number and multiple properties out here. So each and every property can be now printed out here. And if I now go ahead and let's say execute all these things out, it's just going to give me both the input and the output. But okay, it's just going to give me all these things right now, telling the name, the year of passing, the let's say the section, the roll number, the email. And if you want to do a write host statement for this one, you can now go ahead give a write host statement telling write host, and you can say name of the student, and you can get your data dot name inside this particular let's say quotations. Should work, will work. You can say the name of the student is data dot name. You can say year of passing, and you can give multiple write host statements out here. Year of passing, I can give one more thing out here as such. I can say student section and multiple properties out here. Data dot section. So I'm using these properties in my script, and I'm now doing multiple let's say operations using my PowerShell, and all this is possible because I converted my data type. This is very important. This is the very first thing that I do is that first go ahead convert your data type out here, and now let's go ahead and put something like roll number. I can go ahead and let's say pass a roll number out here, and I can say contact or something like that. So I can have multiple things out here, and I can give multiple now write host statements. And now if I start executing this out, okay, now it's string data.name, let's see. Okay, fine. So now if I start executing this out, it is going to give me something like data.name and all that stuff. Reason being, again, I passed all these things within the quotes, so I have to put something like dollar open and close parenthesis and declare my property out here as such. Since this is within the quote, I have to let's say be a little more careful in declaring how my data type is. And I'll just put these things out here as such, which is going to give me a proper output out here in the form of a write host statement. So if I just do a CLS clear screen, execute this out, now I have a proper let's say output telling what is the name of the student, what is the year of passing, what is the section the student belongs to, what is the roll number for this particular student, what is the contact number or what is the contact address for this particular student where I can contact him, and so on and so forth. This is how I can go ahead and let's say treat an entire JSON file as an input rather than letting my client go ahead and pass let's say all the input parameters to my script. I can treat my file as an input, read the contents of this particular file, and then start doing let's say my operations out here like write was the name of the student or whatever is the property out here as such. This is what I could be doing with the help of a JSON file out here as such, and this is how I can write this out. Is any questions here that I can take? I'll take a quick pause. Anyone, any questions? Anyone who's not following on how do you write JSON or how do you, let's say, read JSON?
If you want to see only the output, not the input, so I think
Hmm.
you said sometime back, right? I think how to
Yes.
get
So
that.
if you do not want to see the output, all you can, sorry, see the input, and all you can do is that just call the file. Just call the file or just execute the file out here. It now doesn't show you the input. It just takes the file. So I called a file right now called file handle.ps1. Just going inside, just taking this out. You can call this file anywhere. You can use a PowerShell, terminal, any IC or a Windows PowerShell, whatever it is. Just call the file, and this will go ahead and let's say give you only the output. And if you do a line by line execution, it's going to give you both the output and the input.
No, earlier you said not for the file handling, right? I mean, in general, so if you want to
Hmm.
see only the output, not the input, I think you
Okay.
said sometime back, right? I think in the beginning of the
Yeah, that's
classes.
what I said. So either do a run here. Even this is going to call the entire file, and it's just going to let's say go ahead and give you
No, this
the.
is for file handling. In general, in
Mhm.
normal, while creating these resource groups or storage accounts.
Yeah, that's fine. Even in general, you'll just call it in the same way. You'll just execute the entire script, and this is going to just go ahead and give you the output out here. Even in general,
Okay,
like
okay.
for example,
Mhm. Okay,
in
okay.
general, just call this particular script. It'll go ahead and just execute this out.
JSON is only used for declaring the values or any.
JSON is only used for declaring a values. JSON again is a very powerful, let's say, language. It is primarily used for declaring values, but mostly we use it for a configuration management. When I say configuration management, I want the exact configuration of resources to be created again and again. So it is used to maintain the, let's say, file structure. It's used to, let's say, maintain the state of the configuration. And going forward, we'll see how you use JSON in order to write something called as an ARM templates, and then directly take this and deploy it out to Azure portal. So not only this, it's a versatile language. We call this as serialization syntax. Your Azure portal or AWS or GCP, they primarily understand this particular language as their input. So it's a versatile language that goes around out there.
You showed, I mean, even when you create a resource, right? I mean, in the background,
Mhm.
you can also see the JSON version of it.
Yes, which is the ARM template, which is nothing but something called as an ARM template. We'll talk about that once we get into ARM. We'll see how the JSON version of it gets created. So whichever script that you write, whatever PowerShell that you do, all it does is that it tries to convert that entire input into a JSON object and sends it to your Azure portal for request creation. So Azure portal primarily accepts JSON as an input body out here.
Even when you create a resource on the portal, you can see
Mhm.
the JSON version of it, right? It automatically converts that.
Yes, you can see the JSON version of it. That's what I was telling is that when we do an ARM template, that we a better, let's say, understanding. So for example, I have a resource group. So if I just scroll down, sorry, a storage account. So if I just scroll down, there is something called export template. It's going to give a JSON body for the same thing. It's going to generate a template and it's going to give you there's a JSON object for the same thing. Now this JSON can be looking very, let's say, dangerous out here, but we'll understand what this JSON is and what an ARM template really is. But yes, you will have even your resources saved in the Azure portal in the form of something called as JSON. So we'll see that on how what JSON, or we'll see those kind of JSONs as well as such. Yes, any more questions, guys? Now this is just for one student. I just wanted it one for one student out here. Again, let's get our older students like Kiran, Suresh, and Mahesh. Three different students out here. I want to store them here, and I'm a little puzzled that how do I store an array of information? I'm talking about an array. Multiple objects, storing multiple objects out here. In general, arrays in JSON. So let's go ahead and do that. So let me cut this out completely. And if I want to now declare an array, anything that you represent in JSON should start and close with a flower bracket. This is what I'll do. And I'll now put a key called student details. Not one, but multiple students out here. Since this key is an array, the value will start with open and close square brackets representing a null array. It's an open and close square bracket out here. So this is a key, and whatever that you declare here inside this particular open square bracket will become the properties of student details. Properties. And how do I declare a property here is something like this. I'll go inside the array, and whatever I did a cut right earlier, I did that particular cut for that particular student details. I'll just paste this out. So inside the array, I'm placing an entire JSON object using the open and close flower brackets out here for the very first student. If I want it for a second student called Suresh, I'll just put a comma in line number 9. So the first object of this particular property called student detail started at line number 3, ending at line number 9. I'll just put a comma here, do another open and close, let's say, or do another open and let's say close flower bracket, and I can give the details of another student. So I'll just copy the details out here since these are all the key value pairs that I have. Let's say Suresh. I'll say 2020. That's section 3.
Sir, here is it possible to upload Excel sheet, sir?
So this is a different data type. Why do you want to upload Excel sheet here? So Excel is a different data type again. So it's not possible to upload directly an Excel sheet out here. You shouldn't upload an Excel sheet out here. It doesn't really let you do that. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, okay, sir.
So I can put one more student details out here telling Ish 2008 and multiple things out here. Section B, so on and so forth. I can save this out. One thing that you have to understand is that Excel is a different format altogether. JSON is a different format altogether. So when you're handling with data types, you will have to respect the formats of each and every data type out here as such. So if you're doing in Excel, you'll have to do it in the Excel sheet only. You cannot take the Excel and upload it out here directly. Again, you'll have to do some operations. You'll have to read that particular Excel, convert it into PS object, then convert that particular PS object into a JSON, and then go ahead and let's say upload that particular JSON. Multiple things out here that are involved. So direct conversion or direct uploading from Excel to JSON will not really give you the best output. Your data types or your JSON might not support the same thing out here as such.
So convert from CSV is there, right? I think that will convert to JSON.
That will convert a .csv file.
Yeah, .csv file into
Not
JSON, right?
a dot XLSS.
XLS. Right. Yeah.
Right. So yes, if you want to do this, right? So firstly, yes, you can convert from CSV. You get the object in the name value pair. You can take that object, say object, and then do a convert to JSON. You can do that. You can do a convert from and then a convert to. So you can kind of do that out here. That is allowed. But what I'm trying to say is that direct uploading is not possible. You cannot directly take the Excel or you cannot directly take the CSV and put it here. There are two different formats out here that we are looking at. So you'll need to do a convert from and then a convert to. So that is supported. So you also have something called convert to out here. That's also supported. We'll also look at that too. But yes, any questions here on how did I write this? So this is an array. I said open and close brackets. And this array now has three different properties or three different major objects which have their own properties right now, telling name, year of passing, and all that stuff. Now, if I go back into my PowerShell script, I cannot now go ahead and let's say, for example, if I just execute the same thing right now. So now if you see, okay, let me find CLS. Let me again execute this out. So now it's telling name of the student, but it's giving you a blank value. Telling name of the student is nothing, year of passing is nothing, section is nothing, roll number is nothing, contact is nothing. Which means that the data dot name or the data dot year of passing, that the data dot section is not really supported here. So I'm a little curious. I want to see what is there inside data. So I'll just execute this once again. I'll say $data. And inside data, now the data type has slightly changed because you're now getting one more property here called as student details, which is acting as your parent object inside which you have multiple things like the details of the student. All these things is something that you do have right now, which means that if I now want to, let's say, properly see the properties, I can say data dot student details. This is the only thing that I have. Here I have something called student details. So that's the thing that I have. And if I now go ahead and let's say execute this out. Okay, fine. It's just giving me one student details. So I still take that. Let's see. Kiran, year of passing. Let's see why. Okay, let's see this. Okay. It's giving me, I don't know why, but let's look at it once again.
Oh, the spelling is wrong actually. In the JSON file,
Mm-hmm.
the student spelling is wrong, right?
This one?
No, the file name. Is that okay?
Yeah,
It's
the file name is okay. I'm just
TUTNET.
even this one here I wrote
Yeah,
it in the
the
same
path
way, like
is
I
here.
saved the so the path is here.
Okay,
So
okay.
the path is all good, but sometimes VS Code acts a little weird. You just have to let's say give it a crank, and that's what you do have. Fine. Okay. Sometimes this output is a little let's say meaning. So let me go and do one thing. Let's call the entire file in PowerShell, and let's look at this one. It's a CD, and let's see where's the file path. I have the file path. Yes, I have the file path here. And let me call this file called filehandle.ps1. And this is giving me because I have one additional output here telling that it is right host and all that stuff. I'll just comment everything out. So to comment everything out again, I'll just open the entire comment block. It's all these things inside my comment block out here. Now if I just go ahead and just call my file once again, it's now giving me these particular properties telling name is Kiran, year of passing, section 89 and all that stuff. And then you have name, and then you have let's say a different object right now, which means that the data dot student details, the data dot student details is your data type, which is going to output all these things for you, telling what is let's say the type of Kiran, or what is let's say the name of Suresh and everything. If I go one let's say level further and I say data dot student details dot name, if I do this and just print this out, I only get the properties called the name. So it's going to each and every property called Kiran, then went to Suresh, then went to Mahesh. Is just filtering down with this particular name out here. If I say instead of let's say something like name, I'll say year of passing. If I now go ahead and execute this out after 10:28, which means instead of giving data.name, if I say data.studentDetails.name, do you think this will work? Instead of telling data.year of passing, I say data.studentDetails.year of passing. Same thing applied to section and roll number, and also the email, which now I'm now telling that it is not just data.name, it is data.studentDetails, because this is what you have right now called data.studentDetails. And inside the student details, you have the property for that particular student details called name, called year of passing, etc. And this is how I'm able to filter out each and every properties. Just like we had in the earlier sessions, we had something like dot item dot SKU dot name. We went into the SKU and then got the name of the SKU out here. In the same way, I am now going ahead and giving these values out here by filtering it out by a parent object or by a parent property called student details, and then going into the name out here as such. So now I went ahead, I gave the name of the file path called student details convert from JSON. I did a JSON conversion, and from that JSON conversion, as and when the JSON got converted, it's now giving me a PowerShell custom object. We call this as a PS custom object, which has key value pairs. And I'm going ahead inside each and every, let's say, key value pair, and I'm printing up this particular values out here as such. This is what I'm doing from the start to the end. Any questions here, guys? Anyone? Any questions here? Now,
How does it
if I
is
go ahead, go
how it
please.
is going to one? Can you go back to JSON? I mean, from one student to another student. It is going in
From
sequence, right?
yes, it's going in a
From one
sequence.
block to another block.
Yes, yes, it's
Okay.
going in a sequence out here. So it's first treating the first object, and then it's saying, okay, fine, this object is good. Then it's going to the second. It's a sequential. Yes. Anyone? Any questions here?
Kiran, this is record by record in the array. So student details. If you want to print like in the JSON, like in the JSON format, we have 3 or 4 records, right?
Right.
So if you want to print or only one record instead of student will details will give entire records. It's a set because it's
Yes.
array. It will give entire set. It's not only.
Yes.
If you want to give only one records, how will we write here, Kiran? Like only I want first specific record.
Where object using a filter saying dot name.
Okay, for every
It's
record we
like
call it object.
yes, something like this, starting with K. If you just filter this out,
Okay, got it.
this is
If
going to,
you
let's say,
have,
okay, fine, start student name. Yes, good, please.
if you have a key values where object dot student number is equals to 1, it will give only 1.
Yes. So if I just print this out, now if you see, it's just going ahead and giving me those, let's say, properties of someone called Kiran. So I said data student details where object, the name is like something like K. It's going and give me those things out here. So you can filter it out. For example, you can say student name should start with K, and also the year of passing is something like 2010. You can go ahead and, let's say, give those values out here as such.
For every record we call object in the PowerShell. Okay?
Yes,
Object.
right.
JSON also record only, right? Kiran? For every
JSON, yes, JSON is also a key value pair. You just call it as a JSON object, and you call that particular object, and you process that particular object using multiple, let's say, PowerShell commands out here as such.
it may confuse others, but give me an idea. I will ask maybe. So then, like you have name, year of passing, section, roll number, email. 5 attributes are there. 5 attributes
Yes,
you have mentioned in your JSON.
correct.
Now, Now I don't have a proper key value to identify it because there is no key value like record number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in your
Okay.
attributes. Can we generate in the array we have seen, right? Student details dot zero, student details dot of one. It give that
Yes.
object number if you don't have.
Yes, you can do that. So you can say data dot student details 0. You can index into that particular array
Correct. It will print only first record.
only the first record. So you can do that. So you put a for loop and you can do this. It'll still work.
It's simple. If we don't have a key values, we can use this 0, 1, 2, 3. It's a simple.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions, guys? Now let's see this. I have a script right now. Let's understand what I did here. I have a script right now. Firstly, it's telling data is equal to get the content. It's getting the content. And I'm saying data dot student details dot name, data dot student details year passing, student details section, student details dot roll number, and then student details dot email. Now I'll execute this out. I'll just go back into my PowerShell because it's easier for me to just show it here. And this is what is happening right now. So if you look at this, the data dot student details dot name is not a single name. It's an array of names. The year of passing is also an array of names. Section is also an array of names. The roll numbers is an array of names. Contact is an array of email IDs out here. But this was not my intention. My intention was to go ahead and say a name of the student is Kiran. Year of passing is 2010. Then go ahead and write something called name of the student is Suresh. Then go ahead and write something called name of the student is Mahesh. Now you all tell me, based on your experience earlier, how do I print this out? How do I really write all these things out?
For each.
For each, exactly, or for loop, anything, which means that instead of now telling, just going in and writing my statements, I'll do for each. Wherein I'll say for each object in data dot student details. I can do that. I can go ahead and say in that particular data dot student details. Please go ahead and let's say write this out. And instead of doing a data dot student details out here, I'll represent the object dot name. I'll say it is object dot year of passing. And I'll now call everything as object inside my for each loop. You can now say object out here. Instead of now calling everything out here as such, you can now go ahead and represent everything in the form of an object. You can do an object out here as such. I'll save this out. And now if I go ahead and execute the script once again, it looks a little clumsy. It does the work. It gives you all the student details out here. But if you want to, let's say, put a proper separator out here, just do a right host line separator, something like this, so that you get to know when one particular object is ending and when the other is starting. You can have all these things out here such telling the student name of the student is something like this. Year of passing is 2010. Section is B. Roll number is 89. Contact is something like this. Then you have the name of the second student name out here called Suresh. Then year of passing is something. Then the section, then the roll number, and so on and so forth. Now, I do not have to update my script if the client goes ahead and puts one more name. Something like XYZ. Something like 2020. Something like Z. Multiple things out here. All I'll do is just execute my script again. And this fourth student will also now come into picture. Saying that, okay, fine, this is the fourth student out here such. So now the advantage of this is that whenever someone, let's say, adds something or appends this particular file, you as a, let's say, administrator of this particular PowerShell script doesn't really have to do anything. All you do is just execute your script. It'll still handle those things out here as such. But if there are multiple properties, yes, we'll also see how do you, let's say, append your scripts and how do you, let's say, handle your scripts and so on and so forth. So this is how you can write all that particular details in a JSON file. Let your PowerShell read that particular JSON file and then do your write host statements out here. Now the idea that I'm getting into is instead of having student details, I want to, let's say, have something like Azure details. I want to have a resource group name. In place of name, I would say resource group name. I would say a storage account. I would say a container. I would need to say a file path. And then in the for each, instead of just going in and writing these out, I want to now get in all my logic like if else, and then go ahead and, let's say, do new hyphen az resource group or new hyphen az storage account or new hyphen az storage container and those kind of things out here. And before I do that, before I get into that, this is the idea that I want you all to try out and send me an email telling use a JSON file. Same thing, use a JSON file out here. And instead of just having a student details out here, I need details of things like resource group information, storage account information. I need things like container information and so on and so forth. And just not for one team. I need 3 different teams out here called Dev, QA, and DevOps. I need 3 different teams, which means I need to pass the array of information out here. I will then need a PowerShell script which reads this particular file, gets all the input, and processes all this information one after the other, telling how does it or telling going into this particular file out here, reading that particular input, and then creating those resources using a proper if else statements and so on and so forth out here. This is what I want you all to take as an assignment. Try it and let me know how that goes, and we'll anyways discuss in the next week on how do you, let's say, do this and how do you, let's say, write a particular script out here, and then we can slowly move into something like ARM templates out here as such. But before that, anyone, any questions that I can take, anything that I can take before we close? Any questions still here that I can take? So all I was trying to explain, yes, go please.
In this
Karan,
session,
just brief the steps about it and
Lokesh,
also
just
about
a second, just a second, just a second. Let us first let Ramakrishna complete and then I'll come down to your question. Go ahead, please.
yeah, Kiran, in this session, we have seen that visual code. So visual code is used to see or prepare the JSON file, right? Apart from that, whatever the things remaining, we have done in the PowerShell script only, where we can do that in our regular previous classes we learned, right? There itself we can do it.
Right, you can do that, yes.
Yeah, so here, what is the advantage of using visual code? Sorry, I didn't get it. Same thing we are
No
doing
problem.
in the PowerShell only.
Right, but see, VS Code is now, it'll work like a universal tool. You know, you can go ahead and write it, write your PowerShell scripts. You can go ahead and write your JSON files. You can go ahead and write your YAML files. You can go ahead and write an ARM template. You can go ahead and write a Terraforms. So Visual Studio has got a very versatile, let's say, approach. And one of the advantages is today I'm telling you, okay, fine, you can write a JSON because you cannot write the same JSON in a text document. It will become very difficult for you to go ahead and replicate the same thing. And Visual Studio also gives you the intelligence power in the background, telling that okay, fine, if you do some mistake somewhere, it'll go ahead and highlight that particular mistake, telling that okay, fine, this is the line that you have a mistake in. And going further, right, in the coming classes, we'll be looking at ARM templates, we'll be looking at Terraforms. For all those things, Visual Studio is one centerpiece of the tool. Visual Studio is like,
Understand.
every time I'll come down to Visual Studio and tell how do you do it in Visual Studio and so on and so forth.
Understand. Now the
I think
usage is minimal, but going forward we will use more Visual Studio, right?
yeah,
Correct.
even later on when you write the code, right, you can clone the code from GitHub in DevOps when we go there.
Yes, when you
Then it
go
will
there,
be
you can
very
do
easy.
exactly.
Yeah, we can clone it
Yes,
and change that code and all that. So with
Last
PowerShell ISC, I mean you cannot do all that.
you cannot do really all that. That's true. You cannot write a YAML structure. You cannot do a JSON in PowerShell, or you cannot do a clone of your code in DevOps. Yes, very very well valid point. So it becomes like a center tool. Like believe me, when we work in a real time environment, right, we don't even look at PowerShell ISC. we just go ahead and use a Visual Studio Code because it's a one-stop solution for me. I can just go ahead do a debugging of my code, or do multiple operations out here using this particular tool out here.
Yeah, that is beneficial. Apart from that, we can use the Notepad++ and convert into JSON or XML, or we can convert. But only the thing here is the error handling is possible in the Visual Code. It will show the error there itself.
Even in Notepad++, it will highlight you the error, but Visual Studio Code is much more powerful in, let's say, telling you what the error is, how you can correct it, and so on and so forth.
Cloning the Bitbucket, wherever we keep, we can clone it. Just it's a like up versioning and all, right? Whatever we keep upload it, it will.
You cannot do that in PowerShell, right? So
Yeah,
comparatively.
I mean,
PowerShell.
So this is an editor basically. So that
it's
is
an
just a
editor.
command line.
That's a command line, but yes, I mean, again, even in PowerShell, you can do a git clone. You can, run your commands and clone things out. It'll support, provided your, machine has something like Git software installed, or the required software that is installed. You can do that. But what I mean to say here is that this is a better, let's say, approach, or this is a better way in order to, let's say, clone things out, or maintain things out, and so on and so forth. Also, it's a very powerful way to, let's say, maintain things out here as such.
So did you
Last
do AZ Connect also, AZ Connect account in
Hmm.
in Visual Studio? You have done that
I mean,
already, make a connection to Azure.
no, I haven't done that, but you can
Okay,
connect it out.
you haven't connected, right? Okay, all right.
Yes, but you can do a connect-easy account out here. Just run the command, and this will also help you connect your portal out here. So
Okay.
straightforward. It's like just like this.
Sorry, Kiran. Last question, Kiran.
Good, please.
In real time, as a DevOps engineer,
Hmm.
do we need to create the JSON files, or we will get the JSON files from the downstream or upstream teams, or something from our client? How the JSON files will come?
See,
Where we
as a DevOps engineer, yes. I mean, see, there are multiple scenarios again. There were scenarios where I have helped the teams create the JSON file and maintain the JSON file as a DevOps engineering team, as a DevOps engineering, let's say, person. This is expected from us. In some cases, we also get files from the team. Teams supply the files, they put it inside a central location, and we read it and then go ahead and, let's say, create all our resources out here. So yes, both the cases are possible, but as a DevOps engineer or as an administrator as such, we are expected to understand JSON and to expected to understand, write, and maintain JSON out here as such.
Okay, Kiran. Thank you.
Yes. Lokesh, you had a question. You can go ahead now. I think Lokesh, you had a question, isn't it?
Yeah, just I just asked you just explain a brief in what step by step. That's all. In one minute. That's
Sure. I mean, I can summarize it out before just
yeah,
we close. I can summarize that out.
yeah. Just what we have
Yes.
done, just
Mhm.
summarize.
Sure. I can do that. Yes. Anyone? Any
So,
questions before? Go ahead, please.
so I come from a non-IT background, so I have a lot
Mhm.
of questions, but I've started from class day one. So I've
Okay.
started seeing the recording now. So
Okay.
I have understood one thing, that is very vast. Azure is very vast. You have started from scratch. So
Great.
I just wanted to understand how exactly what are we gonna do in the real time? Like what exactly you want me to focus in? So because
See,
I have
on
no
a
experience
yes.
in IT.
Mhm. Good. No, no problem.
IT.
Uh,
So
right.
I have
See.
no experience in the IT sector.
Mhm.
So if
Mhm.
you'll tell me, like there is now PowerShell. So you said you mentioned some ARMs templates, something I don't know what.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
what exactly you want me to focus in, like as a newcomer into this thing, IT sector?
All right. So to answer that again, see, if you go through the resume of a DevOps engineer, right? And if you go basically to a job description of a DevOps engineer today in the market, the expectations are also vast. Okay, they expect you to understand. I could divide this into three different things out here, into three vast heads out here. One being your Azure portal. So I can just divide it into three different things of the expectation. One head can be your Azure portal or the Azure administration. The second major head will be automation. And the third, which will become our primary bread and butter, will become DevOps tools and technologies.
So automation is basically PowerShell, right?
Automation is PowerShell, ARM templates, Terraforms,
Okay.
Bash scripting. All these fall under the automation head. So as a DevOps engineer, your day-to-day roles and responsibilities will primarily be on DevOps. This will be the primary skill set that is expected from you. At the same time, since you do DevOps, right? So DevOps is nothing but a practice that you do on a cloud. So it will come back to your Azure administration telling that, okay, fine, do you have an idea of the resources like storages, like networking, like let's say compute services, and so on and so forth out here as such. So it's going to tell you, or it's going to rather, or the job description is rather demanding, telling that, okay, fine, this is your primary skill set, which is like the main focus that we need to, let's say, look at. But at the same time, this needs to be applied on top of, let's say, a cloud like Azure or AWS or GCP using multiple automation tools. So it's a combination of administration, automation, and DevOps. But if you were to ask me, look at administration. Like right now, the first 35 to 38 classes are solid on administration out here. Look at this particular arena. Firstly, let's just go with the flow. Look at, let's say, the administration out here. Understand what is administration using the automation technology. It is vast. I agree, it is vast, but just stick with the classes and just go with the documentation that I'm, let's say, providing in the class, telling you need to read this particular documentation and so on and so forth. And once you get into your job role, once you, let's say, crack the interview, get into your job role, they will give you a description, they will give you a job description out here telling what is expected out of you from this particular role, like which service are you do you need to focus on. Then you can say, okay, fine, from this particular classes, my organization is using storages, so let me focus more on storages. Let me leave compute because this is something that they're not using. And this will always become your primary. This will always, let's say, be your primary bread and butter. As a DevOps engineer, you go ahead, let's say, do that pipelines, do all these things out here as such. So this is going to be your primary bread and butter, but this is going to start after 35, 38 classes out there. And once this starts, this will take you around 20, 25 sessions in order to complete DevOps. And then you have Terraforms, you have Kubernetes, you have Dockers, couple of things out here as such. So job role is ever expanding. And it is it is very, very important for us to follow what the market is right now, let's say, expecting from us. And that's the reason I'm just, elaborating my lectures as and when possible out here. But for me, if you were to ask me, since I'm a fresher, I'm just starting with IT, I'm let's say a novice out here, I do not really understand this out. Just follow along with the classes. Just make sure that you cover each and every class on a daily basis. Just go through the interview questions, and once you get into a job, then you can, depending upon the job role that it demands, you can now focus upon each and every service out here as such. That would be the advice that I can give you at this point.
Kiran,
Does that help,
Okay.
from
Manoj?
this
Hmm?
from this
Yeah, please.
perspective, I mean, how much or which areas that we are covering on administration part?
So on
Uh,
the administration part,
Only
okay.
three,
Mhm.
yeah, three sections: networking, compute, and storage, or are we also going to cover more than that?
See, networking, compute, and storage is going to be the primary. Active Directory, I did not really go into the depth of the Active Directory. I just gave the overview of the Active Directory out here. So storage is again structured, unstructured, like SQL databases and all these things. That are something that I'll cover. Compute, we started with, let's say, something like virtual machines today. Then we'll go into something like app services and Azure functions. That's something that I would be covering. And yeah, networking, I'll be thinking about something like point to site connections, site to site connections, and so on and so forth. So if these are the areas that we kind of touch, this will cover like about I would say solid of 70 to 80% of the AZ 104 syllabus. That's the idea. And then the entire of DevOps. So I would say about 70 80% in the administration plus the DevOps out here as such.
DevOps 100%, right? I think.
Yes, DevOps, I need to do it from the very scratch to the end.
Okay. And in DevOps, we are also covering any uh, monitoring tools, or
So
it's built in within
yes,
Azure DevOps.
yes. I mean, again, Azure DevOps again relies upon Azure for monitoring. So in Azure, in the administration part, we'll also do alerts and monitoring.
So we don't cover Prometheus or Grafana, something like that, right? We don't do that at all.
No, Prometheus Grafana is something that I'm not doing as the open source out there. I'm just replacing those with application insights.
Okay. Data lake, are we touching anything on that?
No, we're not touching data lake. It's completely data engineer. So we are not doing data lake or ADF, data factory. That's something that I'm not really touching as a part of this particular course out here.
So any ETL frameworks?
No, again, ETL is like ADF and all these things, right? So ETL is something I'm not touching because this will, go ever expanding if we touch all those things, right? So I'll just need to, let's say, limit, or I'll just need to tell what is the limit of this particular, let's say, area out there as such.
Okay. Cool.
But again, if you have any, specific questions regarding any specific services, you can shoot out an email and I'll do my best to go ahead and, let's say, provide the documentations. If the documentations doesn't answer, I mean, applies to everyone. I can go ahead and take, some time out of, let's say, my curriculum, and then let's go ahead and, let's say, I can put a one-to-one connect, and we can try, let's say, addressing those questions out there as such.
So what's your email address, Kiran? Sorry, I don't
So
have
it
it.
is same thing as my portal. So it is, that's just Azure DevOps @gmail.com. This one.
Oh, okay.
I'll just type this in the
Classes
chat
Azure
also.
DevOps.
Yes, @gmail.com.
Classes Azure DevOps at Gmail.
So one last
Okay.
question, sir.
Good, Manoj. Sorry.
So basically, so should we wait till the lectures are finished, like the whole the whatever you are
Mhm,
teaching, like to the
mhm.
so after that we should we apply for the job, or in the middle of it we will tell us when to apply for the job and now.
Yes, I would firstly tell, but when DevOps starts, when I start this particular curriculum, which is like post automation,
So
sorry, post administration, that's when you can start rolling out your resumes. That's when you can start, let's say, putting down, sending the resumes across to Naukri. And what normally students do is that they go ahead, they email out the resumes to me. So if you look at the emails that I get, they're full with resumes and all that stuff. So if you look at these things out here, I have a lot of resumes to review. I do a lot of review. I go ahead and, let's say, send across the feedback for this particular resumes. And once the feedback is done, you can go ahead and upload this thing out in, let's say, portals like Naukri and all these things.
okay, so got it.
Yes, any more questions, guys? Okay, so as Lokesh asked, let's summarize this out in, let's say, in a minute on what we have done so far. So today, firstly, we understood. Let me take this out and let me start writing here. We understood what is JSON, the JavaScript object notation language, and we have also said how do you write a JSON, a basic JSON, and if you write it, how do you read it using PowerShell? By using a function called convert from JSON. This is something that we looked at. And once you convert it, how can you deal with those objects? How can you do a write host? And my requirement out here is that please write a JSON file which has properties for various teams like Dev, QA, and DevOps. gives you or which stores the properties like RG names, storage names, container names. And I want you all to write a PowerShell script which goes ahead, reads this particular file, unpacks this file, meaning does a convert from JSON. Once you do a convert from JSON, I want your PowerShell script to go ahead and say, okay, fine, this is the RG name, and then create the RG name if it doesn't exist. So if else statements. And once it does, I mean, you just need to have one script, and this particular file can be updated on a regular basis. And just let's say trigger your scripts again and again to see how your script really performs, and let's say how your script really treats all these objects out here as such. This is the assignment that I have for you all to go ahead and let's say kind of take a look at it. Again, see, when I give an assignment to you, I go ahead and write the same thing out here at my end. So I have all these let's say files stored at my end out here, so I can give you the file references if required, but I want you all to just go ahead and look at these things firstly. So I have all these things basically that is already that I went ahead and let's say did it. I just saved all these things out, telling how to edit a container creation, what kind of a JSON file that I do have, a couple of things out here as such. So I can give these as references for you all, but firstly I want you to just go ahead and let's say try working out at your own so that you understand what is explained in the class, plus how do you apply it out at your own. And in the next session, however, I'll go ahead and let's say give the script and I'll explain how do you write the script out here. But before you do that, please go ahead, send across emails if you have any issues. Use this particular email ID, which is class@devs@gmail.com. Please use this and send me across the emails out here as such. And you can go ahead and let's say if you have any questions out there, you can also go ahead and let's say uh, send I mean request for a couple of let's say minutes out here from the schedule. I can go ahead and let's say do a one-to-one connect or so on and so forth to address those things out here as such. So I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to let's say take time and kind of address that. But what I expect from you all is to go ahead and let's say do these assignments because these they will benefit you in a let's say great extent out here as such.
Kiran, one last thing. In the commandlets, the noun and verbs. So,
Mhm.
what is the better way to uh, when it is difficult to remember everything, right? Is the documentation is the
Mhm.
better way to refer it and while writing the script?
Yes, I would say documentation is the best way to go ahead and do that because PowerShell is very vast. Like believe me, even today I have a lot of questions in PowerShell. I do go ahead and let's say look at the documentation, then the application of the same thing. So whenever you have something like a command, let's say as simple as write host, look at the documentation. Just copy that write host, put it in Google. It'll give you the documentation of PowerShell. Just check that out and see how is it used, and just try to apply the same thing out here. That should help us out.
So that is the best way to learn, right?
Yes, that's the best way to learn.
Okay, thank you.
In Linux, we have manuals, man command, same like the PowerShell. Any manuals like that?
Sorry, can you come in, please?
In Linux, we have a man command, right? Man.
I'm not sure. I'm not too sure about that.
No,
Can
help
you
is there,
And
right? I think you should have help.
in PowerShell, you mean?
Yeah,
yeah, in
PowerShell
PowerShell,
doesn't
any
have help.
Yes, you do have a help command, and it's something like let's see, it should be something like this. Let's see one particular command out here, telling right host. Let's look at PowerShell about underscore right host something like this. There should be something like a help here. Let's see. Just information about underscore. I'll just check that out. There should be a help command out here, which is telling you one specific thing out here as such. But yes, I can check that out and let you know what is the specific command for the same thing out here. But I did remember using the help. Normally, I just go ahead and let's write this out. But I can look at that and kind of look at that. Yes, I can look at that and let you know in the coming session out there. Yes, any more questions, guys? Anyone, any more questions that you can take? All right, so that's it from mine, guys, and we'll meet tomorrow, and we'll continue with our theory sessions out here for, let's say, virtual machines and those things out here. Such. Thank you, and have a good day ahead. Thanks, guys.